Stories from Maine is a collection of true tales and legendary stories of daring, heroism, absurdity, disaster, and spectacle, all proving why many of the greatest legends in American history are our stories from Maine. In 1914, he left his hometown of Portland, Maine, and struck out for the West Coast hills of California, where he soon pioneered new and iconic techniques in filmmaking, changed the cinematic landscape of motion picture creation, discovered future celluloid superstars, and became one of the main architects of Hollywood's golden year. Stay with us and hear the true story of Hollywood legend John Ford on this all-new episode of Stories from Maine. Our podcast begins right now.
This is our all-new Stories from Maine weekly podcast episode for July 19, 2025. Stories from Maine is authored by historian Lori Suzanne Dell. Her books, Stories from Maine and Stories from Maine 2, as well as all of her books, are available through book retailers and can be found on Amazon. All new, weekly episodes of our Stories from Maine podcast stream each Saturday, exclusively on our YouTube channel. And our weekly articles, published in the Brunswick, Maine newspaper, The Times Record, appear online and on newsstands each Friday. And you can follow Stories from Maine on our Facebook page, where we post new Maine history content each day. You can email us at storiesfrommaine@gmail.com.
Now, let's head on over to Oscar and get right to this week's feature story of Hollywood motion picture pioneer and American filmmaking legend, John Ford.
He was born John Martin Feeney on Thursday, February 1st in 1894 to Irish immigrants John and Barbara Feeney. Young John was brought up in the Munjoy Hill area of Portland and lived in the family home at 21 Sheridan Street, along with his 10 brothers and sisters. And John attended the Portland area schools, where he loved to play sports. Feeney's true sports love was the game of football, and he played what was then known as gridiron football while attending Portland High School. His tough and challenging manner of rough and tumble play on the field soon earned him the nickname Bull Feeney, and his tough guy reputation was well-deserved and widely known. In 1914, at the age of 20, like most young men and women just out of high school, Feeney dreamed of fun and adventure, and he had applied to the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis in Maryland with a dream of going to sea as an officer in the United States Navy. But Feeney was not accepted by the Naval Academy. Instead, later that year, John boarded a train and left the rocky coast of Maine, where he headed for the western foothills of what was then known as Hollywood Land in California. There, he joined up with his older brother Francis. The elder Feeney brother had already taken on a new last name, while he worked in the new silent film industry. The newly named Ford brothers joined forces and worked hard and long hours, taking on any jobs they could find at the many area film studios. They worked in various crew positions and took parts in acting, and in many positions that could earn them a living in this new and pioneering film production business. In those early days in Tinseltown, a silent film was completely written, rehearsed, filmed, edited, and released in just a short span of 30 days. And many bit players tried their hand in film production, after small parts as an extra on film projects. And at the age of just 23, John Ford took advantage of this fast-paced and ever-changing world of silent film production by trying his hand at writing and directing. Ford began his directing career with a short, two-reel Western made for Bison Motion Pictures. In this first film, Ford also took on a starring role, acting as the main character, Jack Dayton. The film was titled The Tornado, and it co-starred Jane Hathaway and John Duffy, and it opened in theaters on March 3rd of 1917. Bison Motion Pictures then had Ford direct and star in another two-reeler, this one titled The Trail of Hate, which opened in theaters 1 month later. Ford's third two-reel film short, The Scrapper, was then released in early June. In this 25-minute short film, Ford also starred, this time alongside Louise Granville and Duke Warren. Ford's films were fairly popular and all had been profitable ventures that came in on budget and on schedule. And Ford quickly earned a good reputation with studio executives as a bankable director. By July of 1920, John had 33 films under his belt as a director, but he ended his acting career after the first 3 films were made. And by the 3rd of July, after a 4-month whirlwind romance, 26-year-old John Ford married to a 26-year-old named Mary McBride Smith of Los Angeles in a civil ceremony held at the Los Angeles County Courthouse. Together, John and Mary would eventually come to have 1 daughter and 1 son. Ford had little time for a lengthy honeymoon. After the nuptials, the couple enjoyed a short 2-day visit to Mexico. Then the couple returned to Los Angeles, and Ford returned to the sound stages and film sets of Hollywood. Between July of 1920 and May of 1929, John Ford made an additional 34 films, and he made his first talking motion picture by 1928. Ford also began using a young extra that had doubled as a prop laborer and stunt extra in films for the past year. When Ford decided to make the film Salute in late spring of 1929, he needed young, handsome, all-American men to play numerous parts in Ford's coming-of-age military academy saga. Ford approached the young extra, named Marion Morrison, and asked him to locate such young men for the film. Morrison then went directly to his former alma mater at the University of Southern California, where he handpicked a number of young men from the USC Trojan football team. Ford was thrilled with Morrison's picks and quickly handed out positions in the film's cast, and he rewarded Morrison with one of the crucial roles in the film. He also changed Morrison's name to John Wayne, and Ford gave another of the crucial roles in the film to one of those USC footballers, a young man named Ward Bond. Both Wayne and Bond would work closely on the film, and both became longtime Ford film cast favorites. On the set, Wayne and Bond also cemented what would become a storied and lifelong friendship. We'll be right back.
Our Stories from Maine weekly podcast episodes stream each Saturday on our YouTube channel. And our weekly articles, published in the Brunswick newspaper, The Times Record, appear online and on newsstands each Friday. And, each day, we post images and information on Maine's history on our Facebook page. So, please take a moment to like, share, comment, follow, and subscribe to Stories from Maine on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Stories from Maine. And, you can email us at storiesfrommaine@gmail.com.
Now, let's get back to our feature story on Maine's own Hollywood legend, John Ford.
By February of 1939, John Ford had nearly 100 films made, in a career that had already spanned over 2 decades. But the days of the two-reel B-Western short films were ending and Hollywood was dramatically changing. The old style of acting that had been long popular had now grown tired. New acting methods had developed and new advances in cinematic technology, colorization of films, and new sound techniques, all combined to give theatergoers a greater cinematic experience. And new best-selling blockbuster books such as The Wizard of Oz, Wuthering Heights, Citizen Kane, and Gone with the Wind were fast becoming the sought-out material for the new epic menus of blockbuster Hollywood films. And new, younger, and fresher faces such as Henry Fonda, Maureen O'Hara, Judy Garland, and Ford's own prodigy John Wayne were taking Hollywood by storm. John Ford had to reimagine his own films and step up his own Hollywood filmmaking game. When Ford's newest full-length feature Western, Stagecoach, opened in theaters in 1939, both the film and Ford's star prodigy John Wayne had taken the world by storm. The film was a box office smash hit, and John Ford was now one of the top film directors in Hollywood. The film was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Ford was nominated for Best Director. Considering the sheer number of top box office smash blockbuster films that came out in that year, it is no wonder how 1939 came to be known as Hollywood's golden year. And 1939 also marked the start of a new era in John Ford filmmaking. Ford had earned himself a number of different reputations in his early days in Hollywood, and with his new power as a famed director, his legend only grows stronger. On the set, Ford was known as a no-nonsense man. He was an old-school kind of man, and he believed in keeping his friends close. Since his first films, Ford was known to consistently use a revolving pool of returning actors in numerous productions. These Ford players became synonymous with the man himself, the Ford film style, and each knew exactly what was expected of them. And they often were men and women who reflected and agreed with Ford's personal views, as well as professional beliefs. They all affectionately referred to Ford as Pappy. In 1940, John Ford's Depression-era epic The Grapes of Wrath had opened in theaters, and the film was an instant box office smash, and it was credited as a filmmaking masterpiece, which saw John Ford win the Academy Award for Best Director. By 1941, Ford again repeated his success, as one of his all-time best motion pictures would open in that year. When How Green Was My Valley premiered, audiences again flocked to the cinemas, and Ford once again garnered the Academy Award for Best Director. By the end of the year, the Japanese surprise attack on the Hawaiian Islands catapulted the United States of America into World War II, and the 48-year-old John Ford was called upon to serve his nation. Ford finally realized his youthful dreams of becoming a United States naval officer when he was inducted into the United States Naval Reserve in early 1942. The government's plans for the famed Hollywood filmmaker saw Ford immediately commissioned at the rank of commander and placed in charge of the Office of Strategic Services. Ford's primary weapon would not be a pistol or a rifle in this conventional war. Instead, a film camera would be his basic weapon, and the propaganda of war would be his ammunition. Ford was not an in-studio type of film director, nor did he take a back seat during the war. In fact, Ford went directly into combat action and into forward positions whenever possible, and he placed himself directly in harm's way on several occasions. He was present for the Battle of Midway and was wounded while filming the Japanese attack. He was also present at the invasion of Normandy on June 6 of 1944, when he landed on Omaha Beach and filmed the actual landing of Allied forces, which set out to crack the German beachhead in a daring bullet-strewn invasion of France. And once the Nazi concentration camps had been discovered and were being liberated, Ford and his military film crew toured and documented the harrowing conditions found in these ghoulish and disturbing Nazi death camps. After the war, Ford returned to Hollywood, but he also remained in the United States Naval Reserve, and he had been well decorated for his war service. Among his many decorations were the Purple Heart, the Navy Combat Action Ribbon, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Once the war was over, Ford immediately returned to Tinseltown filmmaking and made his first feature war film, They Were Expendable, with John Wayne and Donna Reed, in 1945. Yet, despite the positive reviews and 2 Academy Award nominations for the film, Ford longed to return to the old days of Western film productions. For the next 5 years, many of Ford's most memorable Westerns were made. Films such as My Darling Clementine, Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and Rio Grande entertained cinema audiences, but left most critics less than thrilled. Many of the film industry reviewers felt that Ford had lost his magic. As 1951 opened, the Korean War also saw Ford return to active military service. Fortunately, the Korean action was a short 2 years long, and by early 1952, Ford's second tour of military service was complete. He had been promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral, and he had garnered another 8 medals before returning back behind the Hollywood lens. When The Quiet Man opened in theaters in 1952, a different kind of John Ford film was enjoyed, and it signaled another new era in Ford's film themes. The legendary director was now 58 years old, and he was becoming rather nostalgic for his Irish roots. His new film was set and filmed mostly in Ireland, with stars John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara leading Pappy's old team of loyal standbys. And this film earned Ford his third and last Academy Award for Best Director. For the next 10 years, Ford would shift back and forth between westerns, military genres, and films with Irish-based themes. By 1956, Ford returned once again to his western roots to make a film that has since become revered as one of the greatest films of all time. The Searchers reunited Ford with John Wayne and Ward Bond and brought the younger and quite popular Natalie Wood to the Ford masterpiece. The film was an instant commercial success and is widely regarded as John Wayne's best film in his long and storied career. The film is also considered to be one of the greatest American Western films ever made, yet it gained few accolades in its time. By 1962, as 68-year-old John Ford was winding down in his filmmaking career. He had thus far directed a total of 123 commercially successful films and an unknown number of wartime military service films. Yet, this film would be special for Ford. It would star most of his old crew, Pappy's players, and would once again bring back John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart, as well as Lee Marvin, in what would also be remembered as a Western classic. Yet, once again, the film failed to capture the hearts of critics, who still felt that the old Ford magic had vanished. However, this film, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, was a complete hit with cinema audiences and has since become widely regarded as a top film in Hollywood's annals of legendary Western films. In 1963, Ford made one of his final films in a near 50-year-long and storied Hollywood career. This time, Ford's film, Donovan's Reef, combined his Irish theme with zany antics amidst a Hawaiian backdrop, and was a romantic comedy that again reunited him with his prodigy John Wayne for his final appearance in a Ford film. John Ford would go on to make another 3 films over the next 7 years to top off his Tinseltown resume at more than 130 Hollywood films. Sadly, on a warm and clear day in the latter summer of 1973, Pappy Ford called for his prodigy, John Wayne, to come for a visit. When the Duke arrived at Ford's home, the two sat and talked about their old friend Ward Bond, who died just a few years earlier. Both shared memories and thoughts, and enjoyed one last time together. When Wayne left Fort Palm Springs' house, he knew he had seen his old Pappy for the last time. On August 31st of 1973, Maine's own John Martin Feeney, who the world knew as legendary Hollywood director John Ford, died from stomach cancer at the age of 79 at his home at Palm Springs in California. And Ford was interred at the Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. At his funeral, John Wayne, the man who Pappy Ford renamed the Duke, delivered Ford's eulogy. Many of Hollywood's elite, family, and friends were all in attendance, and it is said that this is the only time they ever saw the Duke cry. And today, Hollywood's iconic motion picture director John Ford is remembered as one of the greatest of America's filmmakers and one of the most legendary of our Stories from Maine.
We hope you have enjoyed the story of Maine's own Hollywood legend, John Ford. Come back next week for another all-new weekly episode of Stories from Maine. Thanks for listening.
All Stories from Maine original content is copyright protected, with all rights reserved. Our Stories from Maine logos are trademark protected and may not be used without the express written permission of Stories from Maine author and historian, Lori Suzanne Dell. Thank you for listening. See you next week.